ROI is not a shield, but I think everyone has this moment of the QBR is coming. I have to prove that I'm valuable to the business. And, especially in the past years of layoffs that we've seen, there is emotion around that, right? If I don't have a hard number, if I don't have how I really drove ACV or revenue, then I'm in danger.
Welcome to the Emblazers Show, where B2B leaders are igniting revenue. I'm your host, Abby Kerr. And on today's episode, we're bringing you a replay from Next Revenue Summit 2026, featuring Ashton Williams, Director of SMB Enablement for the Americas at Salesforce. Ashton brings experience across startups and enterprise organizations, including prior enablement leadership roles at Slack and Ada. And in this case study session, she tackles one of the biggest questions facing enablement leaders right now. How do you move beyond proving value and start driving measurable business impact? Well, she shares a practical framework for defining what enablement owns, aligning to the right metrics, partnering across the business, and using data to shape strategy, not just report on activity. Before we watch the case study session, here's a little bit more about Ashton Williams, the Director of SMB Enablement for the Americas at Salesforce. She helps go-to-market teams build the skills, strategy, and confidence to succeed in a fast-changing market. Drawing on her background in sales, leadership, and enablement across both startups and enterprise businesses, including her time as Director of Enablement at Slack, she's passionate about creating programs that truly drive performance and growth. Ashton is an active mentor and avid learner, and when she isn't working, you'll find her perfecting a recipe or lost in an audiobook. Let's go to the episode right now.
Salesforce is synonymous, right, with data and in fact is a tool to improve sales performance, but they have sellers who you have to improve the performance of. So I find that to be a fascinating sort of living in the matrix moment. So how do you help the company that sells the most prolific sales automation be great sellers? And now, one, Ashton, I appreciate the partnership that Corporate Visions and you and Salesforce have had. So thank you for that. I think you're going to be too shy to say this, but I think I saw on LinkedIn that your team, the SMB team, was rated the highest performing team at Salesforce. Is that right? Is that accurate?
It is. We call it operating unit, but we won number one operating unit across the business for last year.
Number one operating unit. And we have the leader of the number one operating units enablement squad with us today. Again, I don't think you would be saying that, so I'm just going to acknowledge you for that. Again, thanks for the partnership. We can't wait for this topic because at the end of the day, this all has to be measurable in order to do what we do and maybe do a little more of it. And this is something you've mastered, and I'm so excited, and I'm sure the audience is to hear it as well. So Ashton Williams from Salesforce, take it away. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks for having me. And hello, everyone. I started my career in sales and then quickly migrated over to sales training, then sales leadership, and then back around to enablement. I've worked at startups and 60,000 person companies. And I think ROI has been one of the challenges we faced no matter where we were in stage of growth or in size of company. And so I'm very excited today to talk about how we think about impact, and hopefully you leave with some tips and tools you can apply when you're defining the metrics that you're going to use or deciding how to prove the enablement initiative was worth it. I'll jump right into it though. I always like to start with a shared definition. My definition of enablement has evolved over the years, but I fundamentally believe that every enablement team is focused on keeping productivity and performance high through change and scale. We're currently being disrupted by AI, by geopolitical factors. Keeping productivity stable or high becomes really important, or when you're scaling up or scaling down. I did some research to understand, it feels like change has been moving really quickly, but an Accenture study actually said that the pace of change has increased 216%. So when we feel like business is changing, we're pivoting a lot, the world is changing, it's true. 75% of leaders feel that the pace of change is outpacing their training capacity. So even with the addition of AI, helping everyone learn how to use it, how to be productive, the new product suites we're adding, the complexity with different buyers being added to the sales process, it's challenging to keep your reps up to speed on the basics and the new things coming in. And what was a highlight here is 72% of CROs were investing in enablement to solve this problem. When I read this stat, I have a network of folks that I ask about these things, and I say, how many people feel like they're getting 72% more investment in their enablement team this year? How many people feel like they're getting a ton more headcount? And the answers varied. And so today I want to talk a bit about how we think about ROI, value, and impact to hopefully secure some of that investment for your learning initiatives. I will start, though, by saying we must always be ready to pivot in enablement. Last year was a big year for us at Salesforce. I moved over from Slack. I was leading their enablement team for a few years and then made my way into Salesforce Core. And one of the things that stood out to how we really delivered as a high-performing team was first our attitude around change. I want to read the University of California definition of this because it's on point, but they actually say, as a competency, change agility is about anticipating and adapting to change, supporting change initiatives by energizing folks around them, and ensuring continued levels of commitment when faced with new initiatives. The amount of times in enablement or in sales that you have to pivot, and that pivot is deeply frustrating as opposed to exciting, really gets in the way of how we get to a solution. I always think about, when we have big programs like an onboarding, we have a plan, we have a way that it needs to go, or a product launch. And when something changes, I've experienced that my team at the time was deeply frustrated. And I think before we get into ROI, it's really important that we have the mindset that we have to respond and meet the speed of business. So there's going to be some things we do that are in quarter success. They're not as measurable, but they need to happen right now. And there's going to be some things we do where we have long-term view of the data to really understand productivity over time. But overall, we have to approach that with, it's an honor to be asked to step up to the plate and take the responsibility for a big change or helping a business transform their people to be more successful in this new world. So when we talk about securing investment for enablement and really sharing ROI, we're going to talk about shifting the mindset. I'm going to talk about how you know the right partners to work with. I think as I've gone through different stages and sizes of businesses, different people hold data you're going to need to really tell the right stories with insight and get to the data that works. And how we talk about the data we do have, even when we don't have it all, is key. So I'm going to start with a quick story because, as Tim said, my team did just win #1 OU last year. We are so proud. And I joined this team, I'm less than a year old, I think, at this point. And what happened at Salesforce was we brought all of our high velocity sellers, SMB, under one roof. So one president leading an entire global team, thousands of sellers worldwide. And that was a really significant change for how we collaborate, how we work together, our operating rhythm, and of course, the maturity of our enablement function. Previously, these teams were supported by 1 or 2 people, and now we have a full team of 12. In that year, we revamped the onboarding program. We set out to decrease ramp. We added an always-on skill program. So how do we deliver the foundations and the basics on a regular basis on demand as folks need it to stay productive? And we invested in really targeting some key areas for our folks, which was financial fluency last year, that was going to take us over the finish line to hit our goals. As we were looking to make these investments, some things were super easy to prove. And I will say, when we were trying to secure investment for external training or building an entirely new onboarding, everyone knew we needed to do it, but we had a lot of roadblocks on the way for how we got there or who was going to approve it. And what I ended up having to do was really work with my finance team on who sends you the absolute best proposals to get things approved. Can you work with me on what language you need to see this information in? Because there's a business case I'm going to send to my CRO who feels this pain every day and is going to be like, of course we need to up-level our reps. Our hiring team, our recruiting team is moving based on our strategy for growth. But when we're investing in our existing employees, that can be a little more contentious sometimes because at Salesforce, we have a ton of training on the shelf. We're a large legacy company with lots that we can recycle and lots of folks who can be running training. And so I had the chance to sit down with my finance team and understand the break even of a rep. I think when we think about ramp, we're often thinking about time to productivity, which is true. But if you've ever been at a smaller startup, there is a break even point where the cost of acquisition of that rep and the time it takes them to get productive for the business to see a break even is a different timeline than the ramp that we might set out for performance metrics. And so understanding those types of things was really key, as well as understanding how they think about and calculate ROI against initiatives. What I learned was finance actually held the keys to most of the things I wanted to do. I needed my CRO to sponsor it, of course, but it was going to be finance that I was going to be having to have the larger conversations with. And I had to prove that I had the other departments that are impacted on the bus, like HR and recruiting. I talk about this to say sometimes we don't know which partners hold what value or the way that they need to see the data to be champions of your large initiatives. And so not every business has all of these individual people, but definitely has these functions. And what we're witnessing right now is a really big change in the market of how much power finance holds in the decision-making around a business. I think Accenture said 57% of finance leaders are taking an active role in shaping sales strategy and business strategy right now, which is unprecedented. So they are always looking at how are we cost saving, but how are you also investing for the growth that we're forecasting? And they're looking in terms of ROI. My RevOps team is amazing at telling me what TAM we're going after, the strategy, the insights in terms of, stage to stage conversion or in what market, what is selling. And so they're a huge partner here in confirming that our hypotheses are true. Whereas our people ops and HR, culture, growth, and talent, really making sure that we're bringing in the right folks at the right time and getting them set up for success. And then, of course, our sales and success teams for revenue and retention. When I look across these folks, they all see the same data in a slightly different language. And we learned that when we were trying to go about getting investment. One of the pieces that we talk about when we think about data is leading, lagging, lacking indicators. So my team, we set out to do a program, and this is a slide with data that they shared with me to get ready for a QBR. And in one of my team meetings, we sat down and I wanted to review this because I think in enablement, we have a lot of fear around the QBR. ROI is not a shield, but I think everyone has this moment of the QBR is coming. I have to prove that I'm valuable to the business. And, especially in the past years of layoffs that we've seen, there is emotion around that, right? If I don't have a hard number, if I don't have how I really drove ACV or revenue, then I'm in danger. And the reality is, fundamentally, we are partners across those personalities that you saw in the business in setting a hypothesis for what growth looks like. So my team brings this slide up and we're like, oh my gosh, our content had 800 views, 500 people attended live, the CSAT was high, here's how many sessions we did, here's how many people finished their certifications. And this has historically been the way that, enablement has presented data. And I sit down and we had a great chat around, why is this not a great slide? What is it missing? And the reality is, this is a early indicator of, is your training successful? You need to know all of this at the beginning to tell you if launch is successful. But at a QBR post-event, doesn't really resonate. We're missing some real impact numbers. And how we're describing these doesn't have context. So we walked through an exercise of diagnosing health with leading indicators and showing impact with lagging indicators. I'm sure this is not revolutionary. A ton of folks know this, but leading input and predict and lagging output and results. We have a framework that I like to share, and I like to socialize this with my leaders to really get us on the same page around how we set the metrics for success together. And so if we look at the reach column, you're going to see launch and engagement. So attendance, view time. Did people go to the training? How did they react? Did they enjoy it? Were they happy? Did they feel like it was valuable? That's just telling us, did we get to the enough people? If we set a hypothesis that we want to see X% uplift and nobody went to the training or they didn't like it, we can infer that they're not going to adopt the new behavior. Readiness sits square in kind of enablement ownership. And that's, did they learn the concept? So did we test them? Did we check? Are we looking at the themes of what kind of questions they're asking post-training? Are we confirming that folks did actually learn and absorb that content and verify, do they need to learn it? Or is it something you need to be able to search intelligently with AI? Because that's also, important. And then readiness. That's where we're delivering, a certification, a hands-on application, a coaching, batting practice, as you will, where they're really showing that they can apply the skill, the concept in kind of a secure setting. So we can say, hey, leader, before we hand off these reps to you, we can say they're ready. But when we look at results, that category is one where when I socialize with my leaders, I say we're all responsible and accountable to these results. So we work through our frontline managers to drive the behavior, activity, meetings, calls. In calls, are they using the script? Are they saying the new messaging? That becomes critical. And if we don't see those changes in behavior and call application, we know that we need to go back and educate again, or work with our managers on how they're driving that. But we set a hypothesis at the beginning of every initiative to go, what's the business result we're trying to target? And so ramp, pipeline coverage, pipeline progression, revenue uplift, those are all lagging indicators. They take a few months in some cases, or a few weeks post-training to see results. And so we use these other pillars here to really talk through, are we on track? And so if we look at this slide again with the data, when I talk to my team, I say, how are you going to talk about this slide, keeping that in mind? Because maybe at the QBR, we launched the training 2 weeks ago and there isn't anything to talk about. Or we're going to say, reach was great. We reached the target audience we meant to. A bunch attended live. Completion's not looking great, so we're not seeing behavior where we need to. We're going to work with our managers. We might need to retrain and see where people are stuck. They're engaged because the CSAT is high, and we've covered X amount of sessions, and we're seeing good reviews from our sellers. But this is all just, hey, we're on track. It's not the end result. If I go back into, how we got to results, we delivered training with CDI for our folks on financial fluency. And we did, I think it was a few hundred sellers. We had a number of sessions. And what we looked at was a pilot group. And so we worked with our leaders to say, if we could only do one skill this year, what would be most important for you? And many of them were financial fluency, negotiation. This is really key. And normally, Enable will be great, I'm going to go build that training. But we ran discovery with them and we said, how do you feel like that's going to show up in your business? What is your day-to-day going to look like if folks are better at this? What kind of conversations are we expecting to hear versus what we're hearing today? And talk to me about all the points that you feel like this shows up in your day-to-day. And then I'm going to go back to strategy and say, where can we actually track this impact? And so we ran a pilot in our first quarter. We did an isolated group. We worked with those managers to really have them reinforce the concepts and run the training. And what we saw from that pilot was a pretty conservative uplift of revenue of about 10%. So for the folks who did it, they looked like they were performing better, and we were awesome. We rolled it out to the rest of the organization. We then were able to compare them to the pilot. And what we saw actually was a 15% revenue uplift from driving this training, working with the leaders, and getting them to financial fluency to have better conversations. How we looked at that in terms of ROI to seek investment is, what's the quota per month per AE, and what would 2 to 5% uplift look like in dollars, and what's the ROI on that spend? And this was how we presented it as a hypothesis up front. So we went to our finance team and said, okay, we're looking at, I think it was 770 times ROI, because we had new hires where if they didn't ramp, that was a risk of X amount of revenue. And for a small uplift, we are conservative at 2%. Can't lose, right? A little bit is great. And what we ended up seeing was incredible results from that. And so when I talk about enablement investment, I think there's 3 things to really make sure that we're talking about when we think about ROI. So one is defining that ownership. That framework that I shared is when we really talk about what do we own versus what's correlation. I'm never going to go into a QBR and say enablement helped you, enablement made that deal for you. Sometimes that's true if you have a coach, but the reality is our job is to move the middle and get more reps performing better. And so we're really looking at correlations. There's some important insights, but what are we owning? Which is, we delivered on readiness, we coached your leaders to drive behavior, and we all collectively share in the hypothesis that that behavior leads to these results, and we're starting to see them trickle in. Next is really talking to all your different executives, understanding your partners and their data and how they need to see it. It's super important that you're taking your data and cutting it based on what's most critical to the folks who need to get involved, because they're all going to be a part of that project. And if you do get financial investment, a lot of folks are going to jump in to help and want to be a part of it. And then selling value. I think it's super important that we are consultants to our businesses and sharing data that tells stories, not just data in a vacuum. So how are we driving action? How are we saying, hey, stage conversion here is low. Why don't we try running this training and see how that works? How are we really being in the trenches with our leaders, being partners for just-in-time enablement, as well as those long programmatic pieces? That's my talk for today. I know there's a lot of questions, so I will pause so we can get through some of those.
Awesome. Thank you, Ashton. I love alliteration. I got to be honest. I caught the 3 R's: reach, readiness, results. Those 3 are a nice progression, but it also then gives you the chance to connect the dots. Like if the reach works, then the readiness works. You can believe that there's at least some level of correlation to results. So I thought those were really useful. Do you find like that in particular helps you defend the impact? Is that you can fill in those 3 buckets so people believe they follow the bouncing ball, if you will?
100%. So I'd say that is a riff on Kirkpatrick model. So I would say like I take Kirkpatrick, which is, a learning framework, anyone can Google it, and really put it in the language of our business. When I was at Slack, we had a whole new executive team. It's 7 executives joined back to back over 7 months right before kickoff. And to get everyone on the bus around what are we responsible for, what can we achieve, and who owns what, that really supported the executives understanding what's possible and in what time frame. So what was also lovely about that was put that across a time horizon where we're like, you're not going to see ACV uplift 2 weeks after training. Behavior change takes 6 weeks at minimum. Like, don't expect it. So what we will see is engagement, activity. You should see the staff like making more calls, leaders more engaged. We should see a ton of feedback to know that they're adopting and trying something new. So I have used it at multiple businesses with multiple leadership teams, and it has been a great way to have shared language and also do expectation setting, because the amount of times the leaders walked over and said, I need negotiation training. And I'm like, cool. Why? For what?
Yes.
Right now?
So often people are like, tell me what enablement's going to do for me. Well, you want X. What's your expectation that X will do for you? And are those aligned? Is that outcome really the outcome that this will produce? So I love kind of getting everybody on board with measurement of results together from the jump. And that takes me to my next question. So you said that you ask your team, in particular, I think the leaders, where do they think they need help? And they sort of, to some level of consensus, said, we got to have business and financial acumen. We got to get more comfortable and confident in front of those decision makers, not our usual audience, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not going to disagree. Everybody's got to be better at that, right? That's hard to argue with. What do you also do to figure out what people need beside just, let's say, manager feedback so that you're giving people the right things at the right time?
Oh, such a good question. So I am fortunate to have a strategy team that I can reach out to help cut data with me. So I often look at I would say 3 major things, right? How is our pipeline? Is the pipeline strong? Are we progressing that pipe in early stage and then late stage? I try to look at how many executive contacts are we seeing in our opportunities, and how many deals are multi-cloud deals. Salesforce is quite complicated or complex in terms of our offering. So I look at it both in a sense of new hires. How long does it take a new hire to get to their first multi-cloud deal? What products are they leading into first? Versus, are we seeing people take bigger swings up front to yield lower attrition, better relationships? And so there's a couple pieces we look at. We also look at the leader and their tenure. So if a leader has many, many new hires, because we hire a lot in high velocity sales, we're looking at how are those cohorts under those leaders performing? Do some leaders ramp people better than others? And we often go down to, let's say, the second line and the front line managers and service that back up to the senior leaders and say, here's what we've heard, here's what we're seeing in the data. Is this what you're seeing? Do you have congruence here?
I love it. So there's various data points or KPIs that you're using. I captured pipe size, conversion of pipe, deal size through multi-cloud, and then obviously close rates. When you see those as KPIs, how are you then mapping that back to, okay, this KPI means this competency and skill, or that KPI means this competency and skills? That's something you deliberately do so that when you diagnose that's the KPI you want to impact, what therapy or the prescription is?
Yeah, I think that's where we look at ownership versus correlation. So in some of those things, it's a lot easier. Stage-to-stage conversion, if you're doing discovery training, is pretty like well understood. That's going to be what you're targeting. in negotiation, that's going to show up a couple of different places in a deal. And so we try to look at a couple things. One, is our foundation of skills good? Like in sales, you never ever stop learning the basics. If you can master the basics, you can do anything. And so we're actually looking at like, do we have the right people sitting at the right level? So we're always checking for that. We do a ton of certifications and pitch competitions, just check where our levels are at. And then we look at the business and we try to work backwards. So if it's pipeline, for example, we check, is it scale or is it will? Do we have folks who just like don't want to go more, or are they struggling? Last year we saw CFOs join calls for the first time, and as SMBAE, they were like, "Whoa, hey!" They weren't sure how to have those conversations. So when we saw the pipeline really falling out, we were like, "What's happening here?" And we listened to a couple of calls and discovered it. So I'd say there are some metrics that allow you to be really targeted, and you can say like, "I owned that." And there are some where you work with your leader, because your leaders are also hired for their judgment, their ability to look at the team and know what's wrong and have a sense for what are the things that are not showing up on paper that affect that. Like forecast accuracy is often a leader coaching challenge. They give that type of insight too. So we have a couple data points, but it really depends on what we're targeting and how sophisticated our system is at measuring those data points.
What if your next big revenue move didn't come from a blog post or a cold LinkedIn scroll, but from a real conversation with leaders who've been there?
As the world of sales is constantly evolving and constantly changing, I think it's even more critical to get together with people to understand how are they helping to solve some of the problems that our buyers have today.
Meet Emblaze, a community of sharp B2B minds, CROs, CSOs, rising stars, sharing what's actually working in sales, enablement, and customer growth.
We always find a lot of value in the partnerships that we're able to form with some of the other great organizations that are part of the team here. And personally, I love the opportunity to connect with my peer group outside of other organizations and learn from them and try to figure out if there's things that they're doing that we can pull into our organization and benefit from.
Join a monthly forum, dig into science-backed strategy, and get insight you won't find in your feed. Start your Emblaze journey today at emblazgrowth.com.
And how do you enlist the pilot participants to drive broader adoption? Do you enjoy the same level or circumstances for support of the initiative? How do you deliver back that feedback loop? So let's start with, is piloting basically a regular thing for you? And then how do you decide on the pilot group and to communicate that to create that hopefully viral interest?
Yes, I'm going to say that this might be my own healthy fear from many years of getting things wrong and learning. So I'm sharing lessons that you don't have to learn the hard way. But when trying to secure financial investment without a pilot, it is super challenging. Unless the business is in a turnaround where they agree to throw things out and spend money, it is just very hard to roll something out to an entire business and have the sophistication to go, it worked, without someone being like, well, the economy changed or it's Q4. And so pilots really help us target a group and say, the pilot group versus everybody, we're going to correlate that they did great. The leaders were engaged, and it comes from a number of things. Like the pilot could be the learning, it could be the level of engagement, it could be the sponsorship. There's a ton that goes into that, but the pilot should be this place that you incubate the absolute best practices so that when it's time to roll it out, everyone adopts it. So pilots for me are both on a financial side. When I need to say ROI and how are we spending the money, a pilot is a great conservative way to get a scared finance team to say, fine, try it. But also when we think about all initiatives require leader sponsorship and sales buy-in, and you can't do that without someone saying, this was great. It's so hard. And so pilots for me are like an insurance policy against really bad QBRs. Anyone who's rolled something out company-wide and had to go back and iterate knows what that feels like at QBR time. But I do work with my strategy team to isolate similar teams, similar geos, similar tenures. And we do pilots across various segments with like select leaders to kind of understand, does it affect everybody the same?
One more pilot question that I then have as follow-up is like, you talked about the amount of lag time needed to get to results. And do you wait for that lag time to get confident results through your 3 Rs? Or does the rollout sometimes, it's my 4th R, rollout, does it happen sooner based on what? Like when does everybody go, go? Or do you legitimately wait for results that you believe you can stand behind?
Yeah, so I'm in sales. I'm going to tell you we're winning with every piece of information I have to say that we're winning always. But what I tend to do is really just keep driving engagement. I think what happens is we have a problem, we launch a program, and you drop off from executive engagement. And once they stop caring about it, you never get the avenue again, even when you get the results, to share it again. And so you almost have to create a little bit of fight for it's coming. And so what I tend to do is say, hey, we're at this stage of the pillars. Here are the things that we're looking at. We can successfully say we won this pillar. So it's now on to the next team. Here's who's implicated in this next pillar. Here's the things we're going to need for you to make it successful. If we don't win this pillar, we don't get those results in the next 3 months. And we just keep rolling with that and the updates. We also do an early check. So ramp is a good one. Really, you need a year of onboarding to truly understand your cohorts, because the seasonality of the business impacts ramp deeply. So what we'll say is, hey, from cohort to cohort, here's the change. And we'll keep everyone updated with that, but we'll say we're going to revisit this at the end of the year and see what was the overall impact. But what we can see is these little moments that are saying we're on track, we made the right bet, or we didn't.
And that's awesome. So I appreciate that. And it's and that's realistic, because sometimes you want to capture that early momentum and leverage that into the broader rollout. Hey, still some of this sounds like you've had some amazing launches of activities and skills and development, and people react well, and you've seen some results. And then, the next quarter, year happens. What are you doing to sustain like that behavior change? And how are you maybe reinforcing or intervening to make sure, are you still practicing that? What does that strategy look like for your team?
Yeah, so I'd say it's so funny you ask this. I was just having a conversation with someone about being an enablement means understanding the teams around you and the jobs to be done. You have to know what is yours to impact and what is not, and what you need to lean on someone else for, and if they're performing or not. If you have, product marketing organization where messaging isn't great, there's no training that's going to help you. If you've got a hiring problem because your managers can't coach, no training is going to help you. So there is an understanding of organizational structure that becomes really critical in being successful. When you understand that, you can almost look at the business and say, are we healthy in these 5 ways? I look at how's our talent, how's our leadership, what's the engagement, how's our results, and is this sustainable? So are we burning out to get these results? Or is it like, we're figuring out in Q4, or are we sustaining growth in a healthy way? And with that, it means you have to share with the team what being on a great team looks like. It's not about me. It's not my team is the best enablement team. It's, hey, leaders, when we really partner and you let us consult with you and you work, like you get to focus on your business and your team, look at what we were able to do together. When someone just coaches something for 6 straight weeks and doesn't let it go, look at how great your reps get at that. And so it's always bringing back, at the end of the day, my job is to reduce manager capacity so that they can focus and drive productivity. I have to remind people that like when we really work together and it goes really well, it's not that I had a great hypothesis for an amazing program. It's often that my leaders were sponsoring those programs. They're in the training, they're running the team meetings, they're doing the most. I'm the starting block and the framework for how do you do that without burning out yourself. I might create a meeting in a box or say, here's the timelines here that you need to look for. Don't look for these other things to create focus. But ultimately, they are what makes something successful. The AEs go sell and the leaders make them productive. And I make sure they can all do that sustainably. And so I say sharing the win is probably how we do that best.
That's awesome. To your point, like enablement already has a hard job trying to glue together all of those constituents that you said and then execute against it. But I used to use the analogy when the space shuttle was a thing, like it needs booster rockets to get out of Earth's gravitational pull. And then at some point it goes into almost a frictionless orbit and becomes just regular day in and day out work. What it sounds like is enablement has to be those booster rockets. You have to get it, you have to break through the resistance of Earth's gravitation, or if you will, the way we've always done it, and get them to do it a new and better way. And then hopefully all the other teams who get involved, including your managers, will help drive the flywheel. But I'm sure that there's manager programs and IC programs. Our last presentation by Mike Wallington talked about how AI role play is doing a lot of coaching and feedback, and AI avatars are taking responsibility for being always on. And I'm like, whoo, the manager is still got to play a role, but AI is definitely going to do a lot of the things we wanted managers to do, but do it more personalized and specific and do it at scale. and be always on. And so are you leveraging, like, where's your AI strategy, given that you are Salesforce and you have Agentforce and all that?
Of course.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this question.
No, and I love it because I nerd out about this a lot. I would say there's probably like two camps, right? We are fortunate to have AI at our fingertips. So we use our own products for tons of things. We have agents that coach, we have agents that listen to calls, we have agents that will take action in the CRM for them. And so we want to first start with, hey, AE, are you being the most productive you can be? And are you aware of all the ways that you can leverage a prompt or a Slack bot or an agent to move faster, better, stronger? That's one layer. The second is we do actually have avatars coming out of our ES team for helping people managers practice challenging conversations, like you're not getting promoted, but you did great. Or, how do you have a conversation that, someone doesn't want to hear about not being able to move forward? And so we leverage it in some of those ways where risk and security and psychological safety become really important. Someone doesn't want to go to their boss and say, I don't have this conversation, but it is important they get it right. And that's a place that we've leveraged AI. I would also say nothing will replace the human element of being on a team where your leader cares about you, you're enjoying your work, and you're growing and learning. You have to be in that mindset to proactively go and ask the AI a smart question. And so sometimes we're so fixated on putting AI everywhere. And some of my reps have no idea how to ask the right question to get to their information because they're not that engaged. But an engaged person will go find the information without AI. They would have dug through decks. Your best reps are like, I'm going to go listen to an industry podcast and I'm going to be the best at this because they're engaged and they feel invested and they can see the win in front of them. So sometimes, yes, we can achieve scale with AI, and that's important. But we have to remember that people need to want to go do those things, and they will innovate with all the tools. And so we don't over-engineer it, surprisingly. We have everything at your fingertips, but I'm spending most of my time, especially in high-velocity sales. These are people who are in, their first to third to fourth year of their sales career. They made a decision they want to stay in sales. Is what do you need to know from me so that you can go out and find what you need? And that always returns to the sales basics. The more at-bats sellers are not made in the classroom, the more that I can give you an opportunity to practice, get great, and have good conversations. You're going to listen enough to your customer to know, I need to go deeply understand this financial industry report because my customer brought it up. But I can't make that happen by just saying, ask AI that question.
I opened with a keynote that talked about that human interactions are still being prioritized by buyers. And yet those they're in the most critical, most complex deals at the most critical decision moments. And if you're going to be adding value as a seller beyond product knowledge, and you are going to add value in the most critical decision-making moments, you have to be a bit of a self-starter. Like you have to want to bring added value in those moments. And so, the idea of you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Now, I was always told that was true, but then somebody said, you can make them drink if you salt their oats. Well, I'm like, okay, that sounds like peanuts at a bar. But the idea is you've done everything possible, and there's absolutely still room for the natural selection.
Yeah. I would also say, and I always caution this, when you think about the best sellers you've experienced, they're human people who can relate, converse, and connect. And we're in an era of highly disconnected folks, right? With social media and how folks grow up. Even just having an in-person conversation is like a new skill for so many people because you don't go to the office. I myself go to the office and get nervous because I haven't been there in a while. And so while AI can help us, our customers are not going to find the AI memorable. They want to talk to someone who's going to listen, decode, do that search for them, be a reliable source, because you can ask 3 AIs a question and they'll all answer different. And so I do think there is like a deep focus in sales on really making sure folks can have great interactions with other humans and listen and know how to bring an AI to make that more authentic, smarter, faster, not waste time on the minutia. And we see right now, like it's a real pivot where folks are like, I can send an email instead of making a phone call. And I'm like, but a voice helps. Or going to see your customer and being there in person, it helps. And so we're balancing productivity from AI, which is like administrative tasks, and the deep relationships you need with a customer who's going to spend $1 million with you.
Amen. And that's what they're asking for. So those who were not here for my keynote, I quoted Gartner as saying, 2 years ago, 75% of B2B buyers wanted a rep-free experience. Now they say in 2030, 75% of buyers want to prioritize the human experience. So it literally was a stunning reversal of how the human buyer feels about the human in the loop. And I think you just nailed it. Like it's there's interactions, conversations that people are wanting and expecting from you, and you need to be great in those. AI may expedite that, but it's you with your lips moving that still matter.
Yeah. AI is a great place to build confidence. Ask it the questions you don't need to ask your managers.
Yeah, right. Well, awesome. Ashton, once again, congratulations on your great year. I'm looking for a repeat. Thank you for the great partnership, CVI and Salesforce. Really appreciate that. Thank you for the concrete results that you shared today, because that's what really matters for folks. No theory. Let's see some practical, not only implementation, but impact. So thank you.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode with Ashton Williams. Thank you so much, Ashton. Thank you, Tim Riesterer. And thank you for watching or listening on your favorite podcast app. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and follow the show so that it can reach more leaders like you. And check out what Emblaze membership is all about by going to corporatevisions.com/community. We'll see you next time.